This week, I managed to get my hands on Absolute Batman #1 from Scott Snyder, Nick Dragotta. Scott Snyder is doing the full court press, getting the word out not only about Absolute Batman, but certainly DC All-In Special, the big follow-up to Absolute Power, whatever the final issue is. I'm not actually reading that series. Word on the street is that orders have been soft for the All-In Special, and even soft for things like Absolute Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. I do believe DC Comics has confidence that Absolute Batman #1 is a good comic book, despite lower interest than they initially anticipated would be there for this particular comic book. And I'm going to shoot it to you straight, bottom line up front. This is a very good comic book. It's not perfect. I'm not going to give it a 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, but it's pretty darn good. I would give it like 4.25, 4.5 out of 5, 8.5, 9 out of 10. Definitely right in there as a highly recommend comic book in my book. Now, I'm not going to give you spoilers. I'm not going to spoil the story. I'm not going to spoil the plot. I'm going to give you general information about my feelings about this comic book and what you can expect from it. Because I do think a lot of people are going to enjoy this. A lot of people need to read it. And I don't want to spoil anything that's actually going on there. First up, we'll talk about the art from Nick Dragotta. This comic book, especially when you get the action scenes and you actually get this version of Batman, which is very, very large, very, very menacing, is really exciting to look at. It's vibrant, it's violent. Nick Dragotta is always changing camera angles. He's making Batman look absolutely awesome when Batman is doing Batman stuff. Thankfully, we don't get very many of those static images of Batman like overlooking the city. Even when Nick Dragotta is doing that version of Batman, he looks dumpy to me. It almost looked like he made a clay Batman. You stood it up there, but it got hot and he started melting. And he ends up with like elephant feet or something because he is proportionally so enormous. The only other artist that I've seen come even close to what Nick Dragotta is able to accomplish with this style and version of Batman being so large is really Dan Mora. He's got a really awesome variant cover out there that does this Absolute Batman justice, but Nick Dragotta nails it. And I think people are going to realize, if you didn't already, that this dude is a genius. He's a fantastic visual storyteller. And he was the one guy they needed to put on this book that was going to make it sing. And the art really does bring everything together. As far as the art goes, I don't know what he could have done to make it better. Like, I would say the art is essentially perfect. Now, getting into the characterization, and mostly we're going to be talking about Bruce Wayne and Alfred Pennyworth. The comic book itself isn't from Bruce's perspective. It's about Alfred Pennyworth and what he is and why he's in Gotham. He's an MI6 kind of spy guy that you send into the worst possible areas in the world to do surveillance or to intervene on the behalf of whoever his handlers are. I'm assuming it's the British government because he's MI6, but we never actually meet the handlers. It's kind of blurred out or whatever. As far as this Bruce Wayne, he keeps a lot of the intelligence that we typically get from Bruce Wayne in the Prime universe and other versions of Bruce Wayne. He's very, very smart, and he's absolutely gigantic. Like, he is a force of nature unto himself because he's like 7 feet tall and 350 pounds or something. The best way I could describe it, if you ever saw Bob Sapp fighting in Pride Fighting Championships or whatever, that's kind of the body style that this particular Bruce Wayne has. But he doesn't want to play within the system. He kind of wants to play outside of the system, which I guess is baked into the concept that Scott Snyder's trying to do there. But overwhelmingly, the biggest characterization change with this Batman, and certainly with this Alfred Pennyworth, is the brutal amounts of violence. This is a very, very, very violent Batman. Not quite like all-star Batman and Robin Batman, but I would say just as violent, if not a little bit more violent than Dark Knight's Returns. It does have some Dark Knight Returns vibes to it. Not quite there when it comes to the storytelling and stuff, but with the levels of violence and this kind of, I don't know if he's unhinged because we haven't met Bruce all that much by the end of the first issue. We do get a lot of characterization, but it's almost all from the point of view of Alfred Pennyworth himself and not really people interacting with Bruce so much or people talking about him. It's kind of Alfred Pennyworth's first impressions of him and what he stands for and what he's capable of. So he very well could be absolutely insane because of the stuff that you do to him. There's a weird conflicting moment in here where somebody specifically tells this Absolute Batman, like, you're no killer. But earlier in the book, we clearly saw a scene that makes you think he might be a killer. You know what I mean? I don't know why you would be so absolutely dead set on the idea that this guy is no killer when you've witnessed some of the things that have happened in the book at that point. With the insane amounts of violence, he does not care really about life at this point, which, you know, I guess it's your flavor of Batman on that one. That might be a bridge too far for some people. I thought it was exciting. Like it's very, very violent, but it's very action-packed. It's exhilarating stuff when it comes to the characterization of Bruce as Batman. We don't really meet Bruce a lot. We get information on Bruce, but it's never really with him interacting with people other than a one scene kind of there at the end. But it's a very, very violent Batman. If you don't like good amounts of violence, you might not like this comic book. But if you don't like that, you might not like Batman to begin with, because as far as superheroes go, Batman is a very violent superhero. That's kind of baked into the character and everything. Now, as far as the villains, they've already said that the main villain is going to be the Black Mask, and that certainly plays out here. He appears to be more new to the city and is even being challenged by some of the more traditional crime leaders within Gotham City itself, along with Black Mask as this new group of characters called the Party Animals. And when it's described what the Party Animals are doing in Gotham and the lengths that they're going to instill like fear and chaos throughout the city, like they are terrifically bad people. Like they're all basically evil. At least that's the way that I took it. And you get it from different perspectives. You don't only get that from Alfred, but really you're getting it from like news reports. You're getting it from people talking amongst themselves about Gotham's always been bad, but it's never been this bad. These guys are doing this and this. And there's even some crime stats that are thrown out to kind of support the insane, you know, crime wave that is spread over Gotham now that the Party Animals are there. And it is insinuated that there might be a connection with another main villain that might be kind of creeping around Gotham at the time. So I think the villains are done well. Obviously, we're going to have to get more information on not only Black Mask, but there's like other members of his like little posse there that are kind of strange. Like one of them I really don't get. Like I was like, what is this? What am I even looking at? Hopefully that will be fleshed out. And obviously you'll get more details on what exactly is going on there. I think they're called the Concierge. I believe that's what the graphics and information that have been put out by DC Comics and Scott Snyder, I think at San Diego Comic-Con, was like Black Mask Concierge. Now, as far as the pacing of the comic book itself, outside the art, I think the pacing is probably the strongest aspect of the book, especially the writing by Scott Snyder. Gotham's really the first character that you're getting information on, the most important supporting character really in all of Batman, in my opinion. And it's kind of fleshing out Gotham and what it's become and how it's kind of different. And then you start hearing about these Party Animals and what they're doing. And it really does a good job of building tension until you get to the really big action scene that you get in here that we've certainly seen images of that have already been put out by DC Comics. When you do get the first confrontation between Batman and the Party Animals in this issue, it's like a fucking crescendo. It just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And then you finally get this big, you know, like the match is struck, everything ignites, and you get this really big sweeping action scene that Nick Dragotta and Scott do a really good job on. You do get a come down after that, like a little breather with some more information. But the pacing itself, I think, was really, really well done. It's not a boring comic book. I don't think there's a wasted page in here. There's not really any filler, and it's a big comic book. It's not like your standard 24 pages. I think this is closer to like 40 pages. He fills out the pages nicely. It doesn't read like a double-sized issue. It reads like a single comic book issue, which I think is a good testament not only to the visual storytelling by Nick Dragotta, but certainly the writing by Scott Snyder. Now, when it comes to some of the faults with the comic book, just like what are the things that you see just in the art that they've showed out there that I do think remove some of the stakes from the book, and I don't think is particularly helpful to the story and the environment that you're having Bruce Wayne really come up against as Batman, is with that cape, he's essentially bulletproof. I don't think that really works in any sense as far as building drama or the idea that Batman could lose. So I didn't particularly like that, but there's some other elements into it. I don't know if I want to call it call to action moment, that life-changing moment that happens for Bruce, which is certainly different than our Prime Universe Bruce, where it's Crime Alley. After go and see the Zorro movie, his parents get murdered during the botched robbery and all that stuff. Obviously, that doesn't happen here, but there is a moment during some flashbacks when Bruce is younger that have some very, very modern elements to them. I don't personally think in this issue it detracts from the story, but I did read Batman Last Night on Earth. And while you had a really great opening there that I think was even stronger than this one particularly, the story does go downhill really quick because the writer Scott Snyder was shoving so many modern elements into it. It made the story like not timeless. It made it not really Batman, and it made it almost ludicrous. Like the speech from Lex Luthor, where he's supposed to be like evil Trump or something like that, that happens in Batman Last Night on Earth. I think it's issue 2, but it could be issue 3, was one of the most eye-rolling moments of my life. And sometimes Scott Snyder does go too far. So we do get some modern elements. I don't think they detract in this particular story, but I could see them detracting in the future. We do get some race swap characters in here, or a character at least. Gingercide is still alive and kicking in the Absolute Universe. You do get like a final page reveal. And while Bruce Wayne isn't the billionaire playboy that's, been traveling the world and learning all these skills like we typically see in the DC Prime universe, there is a character out there that is essentially living Bruce Wayne's life. But obviously it's not Bruce Wayne. It's going to be some type of villain. And I was like, hey, if you're going to remove these aspects from Bruce, why put them on another character? It almost makes it feel like Scott Snyder thinks if Batman were created today that, Batman would be the bad guy and one of his villains would be the good guy, is almost the way that you can take it from that last page reveal. It didn't add anything to the comic itself other than adding an appearance from a character that you'll recognize. It removes a little bit of the glow of the entire reading experience. When you get to that, you roll your fucking eyes and you're like, oh my God, why did you even do this? Like, this isn't even interesting at this point. So those are some of the faults. I don't think they all detract from the story itself, but they do portend potential issues and pitfalls that Scott Snyder himself has fallen into. I think people are kind of tired of the race swap characters, although in an Absolute Universe, you kind of expect stuff like that, but it's the same fucking character over and over again, and it does get very, very annoying. And that last appearance, I do think, was just kind of the worst part about it. I tried my very hardest not to give any real plot elements or some things that you're going to discover in the comic book that might be really, really awesome or great moments, just speaking more in generalities of what you can expect from the comic book. Me personally, as a general rule, I would highly recommend this comic book. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this. It's a different take on Batman. Batman is a malleable character. We've seen even more violent versions of this Batman, but Scott Snyder will have his work cut out for him to ensure that you don't start interpreting this absolute Batman as like unhinged and psychotic, because there are some elements of that to it, at least in my impression, but we don't actually get to meet Bruce Wayne all that much. I would put it on your pull list if you haven't. I think this thing is going to be very, very popular, and I believe the word of mouth, in the days right when it comes out or even before that, will start to get better and better as people start realizing how good it is. And you might not even be able to get a copy if you just go into your comic book shop on the first day. So put it on your pull list, and definitely I think you're going to want to experience this one. And we certainly will do a spoiler review. Maybe we'll do it with Doc. Maybe I'll do it solo, but I will be talking about this in full and all the details and all the stuff I really couldn't get into here, because I don't want to get out there and spoiling something that I think a lot of people should go out there and enjoy. So there you go. The logo is still stupid, and I still stand by that. And I still think there are elements of it that do not help the characterization or this idea of Batman. I've kind of talked about it in a video, but this is better than I anticipated it there. If you would like to see that video about how stupid the logo is and some of the other elements that I do think, just from what we were told even before I read it, that we're a little bit off, that's that video right here. I hope you check this one out and have a lot of fun with it.